Dan Rather, thank you so much for being on your show.
Thank you for having me here.
We were just talking before we started, 26 conventions for you in your history. Myron Bosch writes in, what's your impression so far of the city of Denver's efforts, and how does it compare to other cities you've witnessed that have hosted
First of all, Denver's been extremely well organized. One of the ways I know this is how friendly everybody has been. Obviously, somebody put out the word, look, we have the convention, we want to put our best foot forward. I've been to Denver many, many times over the years, and I know it to be, as a Western city, very friendly, very neighborly, but especially so for the convention. Very well organized. I think the setting has been brilliantly designed and done. The interior of the basketball arena is extremely well done. And so we'll see how things go, but I would say for Denver so far, A++.
Jennifer Jackson wanted to know, in your history of covering conventions, who's the person that surprised you most with an answer to a question you've asked?
What a good question that is. You know, I've been so blessed and lucky to be around and be able to do what I have a great passion for doing and make a living at it. It's always hard to pick one. But I would say when former Texas Governor John Connally, you know I'm a Texan, when he walked out of the Democratic Convention in 1968, this was the convention in Chicago where there were protesters on the outside and big trouble on the inside. And it nominated Hubert Humphrey to face Richard Nixon in the campaign of 1968. When Governor Connally walked out, he said a surprising thing to me, what turned out to be prescient. He didn't like Humphrey as a nominee, and I interviewed him right on the edge of the convention floor as he was walking out. And he said, Dan, this is the end of the Democratic Party as we have known it. That particularly in the South, the Democratic Party will have trouble winning any election for the next quarter of a century at least. And what he meant was that in his view, the Democratic Party had gone to the left, and those Southerners who for years had described themselves as, quote, conservative Democrats would become Republicans. He also pointed out that the civil rights legislation passed by the Johnson administration in the mid-60s was not popular with many white voters in the South. That turned out, it was a surprising answer when I said, well, what do you think of the convention? He says, I think this is the end of the Democratic Party as we know it. That would be pretty high up on my list of surprising answers, but it turned out to be true.
You brought up Chicago, and we took some questions from some students, and this comes from an 11th grader, Adam Mayes at Denver North High School. Says, do you think that this year's DNC is going to spark violence the way it did in Chicago?
No, I don't. Different country in a different time in a different era. There may be violence. We know from our history that violence frequently occurs when you least expect it. But the kind of thing that happened in Chicago, I don't think anything even approaching that will happen here. I pray that there's no violence at all. But it doesn't have the feel to me that there will be widespread violence at either one of the convention cities this year. You could make a case if there's going to be any kind of, let's just say, unruly protests, that perhaps they'd be more likely to happen at the Republican convention in Minneapolis, St. Paul, for a lot of reasons, not the least of which the Republicans have been in power for the presidency for 8 years. But I don't think the country's in a mood for that right now. I think the country is in a very thoughtful mood. I've such confidence in the American public. My lifetime as a reporter and most of my career spent on television has taught me to have tremendous confidence in the audience. Americans are smart. They're much smarter than the politicians and most of us journalists give them credit for being. And they know that the country has unusually large problems, both foreign and domestic. They're looking for answers. They want to think, and they want people to think. And there certainly will be people protest. That's in the great American tradition. But the kind of thing that happened in Chicago, I don't see it happening.
There seems to be an awful lot of cynicism out there right now just amongst the electorate. And maybe it's summarized best by a 12-year-old who writes in, Jessica Holguin, how can we be sure that candidates keep their word when they're elected?
You can't. And you can't depend on it. That the nature of campaigns, particularly modern campaigns, have become such that politicians have to say things that even they know that they can't keep their word, or that are impossible to accomplish. But you use the word cynicism. I would gently and respectfully suggest that cynicism is not in the American character. Skepticism is. my code as a journalist is cynicism never, skepticism is part of the job. But I think Americans have become, and rightfully so, very skeptical of political promises. Let's face it, back in George Washington and Thomas Jefferson's time, politicians made promises they didn't keep. But it's become ever more popular, and one reason is the politicians have come to believe that it wins elections. Same with the negative campaigning. We all say, God, when will they ever stop of giving us campaigns that would gag a buzzard? Well, the answer is they're not going to stop until it's demonstrated to them that it doesn't result in victory.
About the machinations of a convention, all throughout our newscast, there's street closures and concerns of, tax dollars, if any, are going toward this. And Joe in Denver writes in saying, why bring all the delegates, candidates, guests to one geographical location with technology the way it is? Why not hold the convention via computer these days? Hold the votes necessary, have the speakers broadcast from local television studios. Ever going to happen, do you think?
I think it will happen. It's only a matter of time, in my judgment. And the reason, among many others, is that the conventions were designed to make decisions for the parties. It hasn't been that long ago that the nominees were actually decided at the convention. Now, the parties have decided to make the decisions on nominees before they ever get to the convention. So what we have now are lengthy infomercials. That's what they are. With all decisions have been made. The convention has been scripted. It's a show. One can argue, well, there's nothing wrong with that. But is it necessary? And these conventions, mark well, by the time we get through with the Republican and Democratic conventions, the total price tag will be well above $200 million. That's one reason I think it's inevitable that in the future it will be done electronically and using technology.